Coming up, are the narratives surrounding Cam Thomas's game unjustified? Is this current net situation harmful for his development? And will it result in an in-season trade? I'll answer all those questions right now.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. And on today's show, I'm going to be discussing Cam Thomas's 40-point performance versus the Spurs and his future outlook. I'll hit on how I feel the Nets tanking situation is impacting his development and free agent market, as well as how both sides will proceed. And joining the pod now, we got Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily. And Lucas, we're here today to talk about Cam Thomas, who made several headlines this week because he had a 40-point explosion game against the San Antonio Spurs, also which came with 0 assists. So obviously that game, given the past narratives or thoughts surrounding him, caused a lot of, stir on the social media circles within, some NBA discourse circles and things along those lines. And myself, I got wrapped in that because during the game, I tweeted out that I thought that performance was the epitome of a Cam Thomas game. I said it was masterful scoring, marginal playmaking, and I didn't think that was that controversial of an opinion, but a lot of people came at me and they were very unhappy with that. So I want to answer the question on this podcast or give our opinions on whether or not these narratives that have surrounded Cam Thomas since his days at LSU are unjust or unfair or biased, and just giving my take out of the gate, and I'm going to send it over to you. As I'm watching that game, that 40-point Cam Thomas explosion unfold, there is a confliction within me because I appreciate basketball. I appreciate scoring and all those things. And there's part of me during these games, Cam Thomas has had a bunch of them. He's had 10 40-point games. He's had a lot of high 30-point games during his time with the Nets. And there's part of me who just goes, this guy's unbelievable. Like, this guy does things scoring that only the top 1% of the NBA could do. The vast majority of players who are ever going to pick up a basketball would ever dream of being able to do stuff like this. And I can appreciate that, hence the masterful scoring that I talk about with him. And then there's another part of me that goes, wow, like, this is a lot of standing around him. This is a lot of watching by these other Nets players. This does not at all feel like a sustainable way to play. And while it's not Cam's fault, because a lot of the time when he's doing this, the teams that he's playing with are just terrible, the Nets seem to lose a lot of these games. And that is just always sticking in the back of my mind. And that is why, I tweeted some of the things I did. I did a podcast about it, and I came away with saying or feeling like, while Cam has these gifts, I think that a lot of the narratives that surround him are unjust and overblown sometimes. Like, there's a question of, is there a double standard with Cam? And at times, I think there is a double standard with Cam sometimes, because there are other players who put up these 40-point, 50-point, like, massive scoring explosion games. And if they have low assist totals, nobody talks about it. But I think there's a reason why there is a double standard, or why that underlying narrative exists. And that is because Cam has not been much of a passer or a playmaker or a defender or do anything really at a high level outside of scoring throughout his career. So while there is a narrative that might be overblown or unjust sometimes, I don't think that it just came out of nowhere. So that's kind of been my take on the whole thing. What is your opinion when you think about the discourse surrounding this player who it just seems like is so polarizing, and nobody up to this point, 5 years into his career, really has been able to get a handle on what he is or how people value him?
First of all, you sound like a nerd. And now, second of all, I know I'm kind of jumping ahead right here. This just feels not worth it anymore in terms of the roster construction and the situation that he's in. I mean, you look at...
Don't step on it too much. We're going to get to it, but if you have a brief thought.
Yeah, it's been this for the last 4 years. And just, I guess I won't jump ahead too far. It's the on-ball scoring that is perhaps easier to guard at a team-wide level than you might expect when you just watched some of the absurd shot making. And it is the fact that, he's still young and it's only his 5th year. And whatever you want to say about him not having peaked yet and the ultimate level of scorer he's going to be, he's still climbing, fighting, clawing to get to league average efficiency scoring the ball. And he's taking up a monster percent of Brooklyn's possessions. I just think the narrative, insofar as you can call it that, is he produces a lot of insane highlights, and how much those really translate to being the best offensive player, the lead dog on a really good team, is questionable at best and proven at worst to be not so related, the scoring highlights, to leading a great offense. And I just don't see that changing anytime soon in this situation.
When you see and evaluate, the narrative and the discourse that surrounds him and things that are put out by us ourselves, we can do some self-reflection. We can also talk about the media of a whole. Do you think that it's overblown, or do you think that the criticisms and the concerns that come Cam's way in terms of his player archetype and profile and what he's done well and not done well, do you think that that stuff is pretty aligned with what his actual value or his deficiencies are?
I think A, it depends obviously on what you're consuming, and B, I think the discussion is truly more nuanced and interesting because the shot making talent is so undeniable that you should wonder and ask questions. How can we make Cam Thomas into a valuable offensive player, a more valuable offensive player than his detractors suggest that he is? And I think you can also agree, even as fans, that a 30% usage rate where he's just handling the ball all the time, high pick and roll, isolation, not very talented teammates around him, has proven not to be the way to get the most out of him. And where the medium, where the in-between is, what his proper usage is, what his proper role is, what he's best suited for, is a really interesting conversation that I just don't think anybody's really having right now. I think it's a lot of, well, this is empty stats. Well, this, he's clearly not a winning player. Well, how can you say that about a guy with such scoring talent? And I think I would personally lean further towards he's not impacting winning right now, and he hasn't shown himself to impact winning in this role. But there is a more nuanced discussion there. So to answer your question very shortly, I think much of the discussion around Cam Thomas is, for lack of a better word, fair, but there's more nuance that we could talk about it. I also think because he's making $6 million this year, that you just throw that number out and it seems crazy. But we also have to remember, he turned down 12 to 15 million. So there's that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that that's a good way to discuss it, is that there are narratives that don't just come out of nowhere, but we don't always give them, the nuance that, they deserve, because, Twitter and social media and different spaces aren't always the places where you're going to have those nuanced conversations. Podcasts, and I hope this podcast, we can have that nuanced conversation, and I would like to right now. But I think in order to answer the question of what is that role, and why is Cam, say, if he's not impacting winning at this current high usage role, why is that? And then where do we go from there? Or where does whatever team he's on go from there to try to get the most out of him? And when I look at the reasons why Cam isn't impacting winning, I mean, defense to me is one of the ones that sticks out the most, because I've just watched him defensively throughout his whole career. And in this net scheme, and at his size, you need to play so hard and do so many things in order to hold up at that size, especially with the scheme that Jordi Fernandez is playing. And I just don't think that that's how Cam is wired necessarily. And that's not something that he's shown to really be willing to do. And then there's also obviously the passing conversation about, what is he like? How do you best utilize his scoring? If he's going to be on the ball, does he have to have a shift in how he approaches all this stuff with the playmaking? So we'll get into it. We'll have that nuanced conversation. We'll talk about both of those areas and what we think it'll look like moving forward when we continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Quo. One of the tools that help makes a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly OpenPhone. It's the same great business phone system you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer, so no more carrying 2 phones or relying on a landline. Guys, I love how Quo, formerly OpenPhone, lets your team share one number and collaborate on calls and texts like a shared inbox, so no customer gets left hanging. Their built-in AI agent is a game changer. It can answer after-hours calls, capture leads, and keep business moving even when you're off the clock. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly OpenPhone. Get started free and 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/LockedOnNBA. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you've got existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. If you're a business owner, here's the truth. SaaS promised to make your work easier, but now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS, that's SAD, software as a disservice. That's why you need Rippling. Rippling is a unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance, all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. What I love about Rippling is how it removes the bottlenecks and busy work that slows teams down. Everything from onboarding to payroll to IT access runs automatically and perfectly in sync. It's seriously simple to use and gives companies one source of truth for their people, data, and everything they touch. And right now, you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/LockedOnNBA. Learn more at rippling.com/LockedOnNBA. That's rippling.com/LockedOnNBA for 6 months free. Coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking with Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily about Cam Thomas. And Lucas, we got to talk about Cam. I want to talk more about this 40-point game, and I want to, kind of get into what we saw in the style of play and why I think it's a good representation of all the amazing things that Cam can do on the ball, but then not necessarily marrying to a winning style of play. And I need to preface this again by saying I'm not criticizing Cam for that style of play or what he did in that Spurs game. He was the only reason that they were in the game. Nobody else could really make a shot, and the Nets obviously have one of the worst supporting casts in the NBA. But as I'm watching that game, I'm thinking to myself, wow, like nobody else is moving. Nobody else seem to be taking a lot of shots throughout the flow of this offense. It doesn't seem like a lot of other people are getting these opportunities. And these are the things that continue to stand out. And then you get into the conversation about the lack of assists and 0 assists. And everyone says, like, that's lazy. Look at the potential assists. He could have more assists. I've done this throughout Cam's career. I look at the potential assists. I look at, touches. I calculate stats of potential assist to usage, to touch. I do all of these things. And if you're looking at it, like in that game against the Spurs, Cam posted a 40% usage rate. He's near 35% for the season. And he had 8 potential assists, one of which was like garbage time, the last play of the game when it was over. He really had 7. Like one of those was a Nick Claxton grenade. Like a few of them were not really like passes that were going to lead to anything. So I just think when you're posting those number of potential assists in a game where you're posting a 40% usage, even though you did all of these things and had this amazing scoring outburst, I think that that's not necessarily a way that teams should be aiming to play. And when you look at it, I think that it's counterproductive to his development. And I think it's pushing him further into the direction of things that he's done historically that he's not going to be doing in the role that he ultimately plays. And one last thing on the potential assist, then I'll let you get into it. A lot of people have been asking me about this. So I calculated it, and I looked at, calculating potential assists per 36 minutes among the players posting a 30-plus usage rate this season, among the guards doing it. There's 14 guards posting a 30 or higher usage rate this season, and Cam is dead last in potential assists per 36 minutes.
Would it change? Would it change if it wasn't guards? I can't imagine including Şengün and Jokic would really make a difference.
Yeah, there's like Wemby's in there maybe. There's a few other big men in there, but it's 14 guards posting 30-plus usage on the season, and Cam is dead last in potential assists per 36 minutes. He's at 10.5 assists per 36 minutes among that group. Like, for reference to other players, obviously, like at the top, you have guys like Trae Young's at 19.4, Devin Booker 17.9, Cade 17, Keontae George 16, Brunson 15. Like, there's a gap. And then there's some players that are close to Cam, like Austin Reeves is at 11.2, Jamal Murray's at 12, Tyrese Maxey's at 12. But like, these stats, when I've calculated these passing stats throughout my career that I try to, get a gauge on willingness as a passer, Cam is always at the bottom when I calculate them. And I don't think that that's a coincidence.
Of course it's not. And listen, a lot of this, we kind of pontificated about it in the first segment. A lot of this comes down to people, because they have, brains and spare time that they value, unlike us, aren't sitting down and watching a terrible Nets team play 48 minutes and going through defensive possessions and going through the rotations on defense that, Cam Thomas might not make, going through the advantages on offense that he might miss, a driving lane that he doesn't take, a possession where he holds the ball and lets everything settle. Those don't show up in highlight reels. And really, at the end of the day, this is what all this discourse kind of comes back to. When you watch the Nets, it's not it's not a controversial statement to say he's not looking to weaponize his scoring gravity to pass the ball, and create, high level opportunities for others. And outside of, he's jumped in the making regimented pick and roll reads and all this stuff. But that really is what it comes down to. And it's whether or not the scoring is enough to kind of justify that. And
the defense factors into that conversation also, because you're giving stuff back on the defensive end. Like, if we're just saying, could his scoring outweigh the lack of playmaking or the lack of looking to play make? I think that the answer is still no, but I think it's a more interesting conversation. But if he was doing this and he was a plus defender on the other end, it's a much different conversation.
Let's talk about this, like what we've seen this season in terms of like this context, these 4 games. I mean, you see, what this little segment is titled on the Chiron. Like, it feels untenable right now for me. Like, he's in a lineup against in the Rockets and in the Spurs game with like Tyrese Martin, Jalen Wilson, Noah Clowney, Day'Ron Sharpe. Who is supposed to help him? How are they even supposed to have a really, a plus defense with that lineup? And so the argument that, if you surround Cam with a really good defense, he can maybe drag you to a league average offense, and then you can create turnovers and get on the break, and that's a decent bench unit. Or, maybe he can scale down into a lower usage role. That's just not happening with these type of lineups, which is why I'm thinking that this partnership just doesn't make sense for either side anymore.
Yeah, and
he's looked, and I hate to say this, and I get it, he's looked visibly disinterested for most of this season. Is that fair to say?
On both ends of the floor, you would say? Or
overall. I mean, aside from he got hot against Cleveland and brought them back, and the Spurs game, he was really feeling it. But I would say like 2/3 of this season, he just has not looked, and neither is Michael Porter Jr. and often Nick Claxton.
A lot of the team. I mean, we're talking about 4 games. We're talking about 4 games. We have to put that into focus. I think with Cam, you're seeing stretches where he's into it. Like you said, like that Cleveland game, like the Spurs game, he looked into it when he has it going offensively. There were moments, I thought, in the Rockets game where he actually gave some defensive effort. He's banged up. I think we also need to, put that into the equation where he has a broken nose. He got stitches in the Spurs game. I'll say the Hornets game in the first game of the season, and this was the whole Nets team, not just Cam Thomas. He did not look like he wanted to be out there, but neither did Michael Porter Jr., neither did a lot of other players. But I want to get back to what you said about the partnership seeming like it's untenable. And that's a point that I made. I recorded a podcast 4 days ago, and I agreed on that. And a point that I've, made during the Spurs game, it was really the whole point. People kind of jumped down my throat for it, was that I think that this situation, ultimately, I've said numerous times, I think it's trending towards a trade, but I think right now it's also harmful for Cam Thomas. Like, I think that I'll let you get into it. Just let me finish this. I think that this is not going to bring the best out of Cam Thomas. And to some people, the best might be, him scoring 40 points on 11 of 25 shooting with 7 potential assists. Like, that might be the best to some people. To me, it's cool to watch, like, in times. I don't really care about it because I know that I care. I don't not care, but I know that it's not the way that Cam's going to be playing on a contending level team. Like, that's just not going to happen. And some people might think that it is because he's that level of offensive player, but you don't see players who, don't make their other teammates better post 35% usage rates in the NBA, at least not players on a good team or like a contending team with real aspirations. And that's the thing. And I think you made a good point before about like when you watch Cam in the Spurs game, the reason I said epitome of a Cam Thomas game, masterful scoring, marginal playmaking. It's just like you look at all of, all these drives and all this shot making and all the things that he's doing. And this has been the knock on Cam. All the passes, like if you look at all his potential assists, they're really like last resort passes where like you have to make that pass. Otherwise, it's just completely ridiculous. You said not leveraging his playmaking to do other things and make other people better. And I don't think he does that. And is all of that just because like he's this selfish player and he hates passing and all that stuff? No, I just don't think it's within his skill set a lot of the time. Like it's not what he's good at. Like he has clear limitations as like a court mapper, court processor, things that are harder to do when you're only like 6'2", 6'3" like he is. So I think that this situation where he's surrounded by all these players, like people are commenting to me, like, look at who he's surrounded by. Like, are the best chances for him to jack up all these shots and try to carry this team to a win? And I'm like, yes, that's my whole point. That's not how he should be trying to play, because on a good team, he's not going to be playing like that. He's going to have to play within a system and do other things. And posting a 40% usage with 7 potential assists in a game is something that he's never going to do on a good team, in my opinion.
It just feels pointless at this point, this situation. NBA teams that will value Cam Thomas as a incredible shot maker first, and then that will play in the NBA, don't want. I can't imagine that a front office maybe looking at their books for next year, wondering if they can get Cam on like a friendly deal that they think he can be a real contributor. I just can't imagine them wanting to see more of this. With the
like you're saying, you can't imagine this being the role that he's going to play if a team wants him.
Yeah, they want to see him do different things. Like I always make the comparison to Norm Powell as this guy who excised a lot of on-ball reps from his game, turned into one of the best movement and catch-and-shoot three-point shooters in the world, and then a lower usage on offense made him a little bit more tenable on defense. I know they're not the same player. I would trust Cam a little bit more making pick-and-roll reads and stuff like that. But point being, I would imagine that NBA teams want to see that. I don't think they want to see this. The Spurs game was awesome. I'm not going to sit here and be like, actually, that stunk that he scored 40 points on this garbage team with nobody really helping him score. The issue, obviously, is that he doesn't shoot that well on those insane shot attempts every game. Outside of the Spurs game, he's 17 of 42 on the season. Like, he's not Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the mid-range, whose playmaking, Shai leaves a little bit to be desired, but he is the best mid-range scorer since like KD and Michael Jordan. It's just the burden that you have to get to as an efficient scorer. And Cam's getting there. He's getting better. But the role is just not for him. I don't think it's what NBA teams want to see. I don't think it's really helping him change his perception. And then I definitely don't think the defense is either. But of course, that goes back to this team seemingly giving up on most of the defensive possessions this season. It's not just him.
And that was my main point. Like when I put out what I put out during the Spurs game and all this stuff, and I have had people ask me this in the past and call me a Cam hater and all this stuff, which I just think is ridiculous, because when Cam's done a lot of these amazing things throughout the years, I've always reported on it and I've marveled at it a lot of the time. But they've asked me, like during that Spurs game, like there's so many players who have these amazing scoring games, and like the discourse surrounding those guys who can do those things, like people can just appreciate that and they can just look at that and say this is amazing and not point to all the other flaws in his game. And I'll say maybe like I'm at fault and the media as a whole and other NBA people are at fault for not appreciating what Cam can do in some of these games, not just like stopping and first saying, like, this is unbelievable what he's doing in this game, the shot making and all that stuff. But to answer those questions, the reason is because a lot of those top players who can have these kinds of games, they aren't really bad defenders or like not making their teammates better or don't rebound the ball or don't do anything else outside of scoring. And I'm sorry, like, if that sounds harsh, like I'm not trying to like just rip on Cam and tear him down, but just like if you answer the question in this Spurs game and really throughout this season and his entire Nets career, outside of scoring, is there one thing that he does at like even a decent level?
I will say this. It's encouraging that the free throw rate, the 3-point rates are increasing. Like he's becoming a better scorer, and he needs to be.
I'm a believer in the scoring. Like I think that his efficiency is improving. I think that he's a really good scorer. Do I think he's at like the SGA level? No. Like I believe in the scoring, but outside of the scoring, like what does he do that impacts winning?
I mean, obviously nothing. I mean, we don't have to really
like
sugarcoat that.
That's the answer to the question of like why do people keep pointing to this stuff?
I think there's a good, and I think when you kind of just highlight scout him, and boy, that is a fun thing to do. You know, this play that I sent you earlier today against Houston, it's Houston game's just on the brain because I watched it last night, elucidates some of these playmaking concerns that don't even always show up in the potential assists or the assists and whatnot. He catches the ball on like, you know, a pin down into a handoff with like 12 on the clock, and he maybe has an advantage, and he holds it and freezes for 2 seconds and lets the defense reset. He dribbles to the right. He gets doubled from the left, meaning there's a 2-on-1 on the left side, and it's not a scripted pick and roll read. It's like a very dynamic situation. You're in the flow. He passes it to the right, loses the advantage. Noah Clowney's in the corner. There's like 7 on the clock. There's nothing doing. Back to Cam. So again, no one else on the team can really do anything. So now Cam has to make it shake again. Dribbles to the left, gets a screen, gets trapped on that screen. The advantage, again, is on the right side of the court because Day'Ron's rolling. There's a single side defender on the right side, but it's like a late clock situation. You know, again, kind of dynamic. Cam, again, passes it to probably the wrong guy. I know the clock's running down, but Nolan Traore in the corner with KD on him, with 3 on the shot clock. And part of the reason the shot clock is so low was because of Cam's initial hesitation with the ball. And then Nolan Traore takes a step back, fading 3 in the corner at the expiration of the shot clock, gets blocked by KD. It hits the side of the backboard. You can count that as a potential assist for Cam Thomas, but it's a bad offensive possession for the team. And I'm going to say it's a bad offensive possession for him, but it's not really, you know, all his fault that he's put into these situations where no one else can really help him. And it's a role that he's not really suited for. Hey, do everything for us on offense. And if I could just point to that one possession, I think it's about 5 minutes left in the first quarter against the Rockets. You guys should watch that, and it'll explain to you why I think this situation has just run its course for the team and the player, and it just doesn't feel great. I don't know. It doesn't feel great when you're watching the game.
And with this, we got to answer the question of like, what do we think this looks like moving forward? Outside of just how do the Nets and Cam resolve this situation, where do we think they go from here, and how do we think his NBA career is going to unfold? So we'll get to all that when we close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's our most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. Guys, this is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools to help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how the Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. The swivel screen is a game changer. You can go from running on the Tread Plus to strength training without missing a beat, and the personalized class recommendations keep you engaged. You get workouts tailored to your vibe and energy level each week. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking with Lucas Kaplan of Nets Daily. And Lucas, I think that we made a point about Cam Thomas before this of, the things, or I made a point about this not being the situation that I think was going to benefit Cam Thomas's development. And I also really don't think that it's going to benefit Cam Thomas's market. And I want to get your opinion on that, because I came into this season saying after Cam was forced to settle for this qualifying offer, and there was really no interest in him around the league, and he was reportedly seeking a deal approaching $30 million. The Nets came in at $15 million, and that was, per $15 million annually for 2 years. That was all they were willing to give him. I said if he was going to get this kind of offer that he wanted, if he just came in and did the same things and was like this really like exciting scorer who can do these other things, but the playmaking was still at like a marginal level, the defense still looked not good, I didn't think that that was going to increase his market. And we're only 4 games in, but like it has looked like much of the same for these 4 games for a lot of the time. And I don't see that benefiting his market. Like I'm just, maybe I'm wrong. I'm very skeptical that approach with the Nets, say for the first half of the season or the whole season, is going to result in him getting the kind of contract he wants. Because we went over the playmaking and like I gave out the potential assist numbers relative to guys with the usage that he has. And then I think if you just look at the defense, like there's a lot of possessions that I watch in this Nets scheme where Cam is just very out of place, especially with like the blitz and rotate and low man rotations and all the things that the Nets want to do that frankly, like he shouldn't be in those positions, which is why I think he's not a fit for them. Yeah. But also like the rebounding, like the battling on the boards, the like switching and trying to, go gain position or hold position down low. Like his size defensively, like we talk so much about the playmaking and all that stuff. I've pointed to the defense the most. I think that that's the biggest inhibitor to him getting like a sizable contract, because I think his lack of size to me just really jumps off the screen defensively. And part of that might be what the Nets are trying to do in this scheme.
Yeah, I think part of the market stuff is that he and his camp will just hope that the market is just different this summer and there are more teams that are willing to pay him, and that could be the case, which will help him. I think the offense, if there are no offensive questions, teams can probably live with it, right? And if there are no defensive questions, teams can probably live with it. But as you said, it's the combination. I just think they have to rely on the market being different this summer. I don't think anything's really going to materially change other than, the 3-point rate increasing, the free throw rate increasing. If teams look at that and then they see the bump in assist rate and perhaps the bump in like pick and roll playmaking, and they believe that a change of scenery will kind of sharpen his focus, then that is the best case scenario for Cam Thomas. But I don't think the basketball he's playing on this team is really, again, helping anybody. Just personally, go on.
And with that, I wanted to ask you the next question. Like with that statement that you just made, I think you would agree that not just for the Nets, who I think it's pretty clear the Nets don't view him as a long-term piece. If I were Cam, I would want to get out of this situation, right? Like probably at that December 15th date where these free agents can be traded again. Like I would want to get to a situation where I can show some things on whether like an up and coming team or like an actual contending team. I can show things that front offices are going to see and say, look, like this translated to winning in that kind of situation. Like, is that, to me, that's what would benefit his market the most. But I'm not sure he sees it that way. He might say me averaging 28 points a game would benefit me the most. And maybe he's right. Maybe I'm wrong. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, that might be the case. I don't know if he's going to get that opportunity with the way the season is going to go. And, to play 35 minutes a night, to average those 27 points a game. I would agree that it would make sense for a team looking at that $6 million being like, well, that's pretty cheap for a guy that we know can help our offense in the right context. I would think that's better for CT. And I would think that, he's over being here, but he's kind of over the whole process in general, right? That's why he took the no trade clause, he's making even less money so that he has a no trade clause. And, for the Nets and Nets fans, many of them, I'm sure it can be kind of a bummer to turn on the game for the rookies and instead see a no rookie lineup where CT is running 40 high pick and rolls a game. Like, I thought we kind of did this already. So I have no idea how to gauge this trade market. Like, vibe-wise, it does feel like this is going to come to an end soon, but I don't really know what the mechanism of that would be.
Are you? And I actually like, I think people think that I don't like Cam. Like, that's not true at all. Like, I like watching him play in certain contexts. I'm really like encouraged by the idea of seeing how this would fit in a team that has like real aspirations, and how a different team where maybe there's some actual pressure on Cam. Like the only 2 seasons that Cam has been in the rotation with the Nets, they had no aspirations. So he could just go try to go nuts. Like if
Like, can the Pistons please trade for him? He would help the Pistons
like,
so much. Like, they have no perimeter scoring talent outside of Cade, no shot making. He's making $6 million. You don't have to give up Asar or Ron Holland. Like, that would be a context in which I would be way more excited to watch Cam Thomas play. And like, I haven't looked at their cap sheet and exactly how it would work. But a team like that, I feel like would be a perfect situation for him because they're gonna, right, probably make the playoffs. They're an offensively challenged team with a defensive identity, and they really miss exactly what he does. To me, if he goes there and he kind of has the Dennis Schroeder season for the Pistons, but like even better, that would seem like a great fit for what he wants this offseason, right? I think NBA teams would be like, okay, there we go.
I've heard some people float the Pistons, like not like inside source, just mostly like fans speculating I think that makes sense. I think there's other teams that could make sense, and I think that we've seen like that. Like I'm not gonna say like Cam Thomas and Jordan Poole are a 1-to-1 comparison, but we saw Jordan Poole be a valuable player for a championship team. I don't think him and Cam are the same player, but they definitely have similarities, and we saw him make an impact for a team like that. And I'm enthused by the idea of seeing Cam in a situation where there are real aspirations, there are more significant ramifications and pressure on you to play within a system. And I want to see how his skill set can shine, in a system like that and really incentivize him to do some of these other things more than just playing on this Nets team with Yegor Dillman and Nolan Shore and Ben Surratt. Like, that is much more encouraging for me. So I think that we both agree that this is trending towards a trade, or at least it should be. And if I'm Cam's representation, like we've documented it, he took less money, like $3 million less money on a 1-year deal to maintain his no trade clause. And to me, I think that was obviously an indication that he thinks the Nets are going to try to trade him. And for me, that probably indicates him and his agent saying, look, we're going to give up that $3 million, keep this no trade clause, and then we can handpick our next destination this season to whatever spot we feel is going to best, juice our market heading into unrestricted free agency. So that might be the Pistons. That might be, whatever other team. I don't know if you have any other teams, but like, I feel like this is, I think we both agree this is heading towards a trade, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. Like, I don't think the Nets are going to get anything significant in terms of like an asset or a player back, but I'm excited to see like where Cam goes and what he feels is his best situation and how that plays out, because he does have one of the most incredible scoring skill sets that you'll see in the NBA.
Yeah, I think you said it all. I don't really have anything more to add on that. My last point is that, and this is totally unrelated, can they please just get more athletic? I'm so tired of watching this unathletic, not like strong or forceful team for like my whole life since Vince Carter. It's so ironic. I'm a Nets fan because of that guy right behind me, Vince Carter dunking the basketball, and like Richard Jefferson. And since then, they were like, we actually are just not going to be athletic at all.
We got Drake Powell. I mean, like, there we go.
There's a step in the right direction.
That's why I think a lot of I mean, it's just we have to close this out so we don't have too much more time. And I want to get into this on another episode. So hopefully we can have you on again this week. But the lack of athleticism is really just like jumping off the screen and punching you in the face 100 times, especially in this defensive scheme that they're trying to play. Like, I just, for the life of me, I don't understand what they're doing. And we need to talk about this on another episode. I think the only explanation I have is that Jordy wants to implement some of this stuff. And he doesn't really care about them losing because it's a tanking season. But like, I just can't watch like I can't watch like Nick Claxton in one of the Nets wings blitz a screen and then Cam Thomas be the low man rotating over to a 7-foot center like Alperen Şengün or Kevin Durant or someone. Like, it makes no sense. And I'm going to close it out and leave it at that because we'll get into this on another episode. But Lucas, they need to get more athletic. And I think that they will, because the Nets have a vision clearly of how they want to do things, and athleticism, as it is with every NBA team, is going to be paramount. But Lucas, appreciate you taking the time as always. If you guys don't, go follow Lucas on Twitter. Also, check out his stuff at Nets Daily. He does a great job. But appreciate you taking the time, man, and you'll be back soon. That does it for today's episode of Locked On Nets. If you guys do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy the content, take a second right now, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. We got a game against the Hawks on Wednesday at Barclays Center. Then we got some Nets practice and back to Barclays Center on Sunday. So I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.